It was supposed to be a routine jump, nothing more than a quiet haul through the edge of known space. Just me, my old ship, and the stars stretching on forever. Out there, where the silence feels thicker, you start to get comfortable with being alone. I was good at it. After all, no one travels this far from the core without being a little bit of a loner. No patrols, no comms chatter, and no other ships. Just me and the hum of the engine. At least, that's what I thought. I first saw them on my scanner, blips faint and scattered showing up where there shouldn't have been anything. I frowned and tapped the console, thinking maybe it was a glitch. Ships that far out were rare. Fleets. Impossible. My system pinged again, this time sharper. It was real. My fingers hovered over the controls as the gravity of the situation started to sink in. There were ships out here, drifting in the dark. A lot of them. My heart started pounding, that instinctive mix of fear and excitement taking hold. I pushed the throttle forward, guiding my ship toward the source. Minutes later, the view outside my cockpit window shifted. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, an illusion caused by stars and shadows. But then I saw it. They were ships, all right. Massive silhouettes sprawled across the void, like sleeping giants caught in an eternal slumber. The fleet was enormous, miles of hulls and spires, half hidden by the darkness, stretching farther than I could see. Some of the vessels looked scarred, their hulls cracked and worn, but others were eerily pristine, untouched by time. There was no way they could have been human. No one I knew built ships like these. Their shapes were alien, elegant in a way that made the usual blocky freighters look clumsy. I swallowed hard, trying to process what I was looking at. "What are you doing out here?" I whispered under my breath, as if expecting the dead ships to answer. No comm signals, no lights, just the cold metal hulks floating lifelessly. My gut twisted. I'd heard stories about abandoned ships before, rumors from old pilots at the docks who talked too much after too many drinks. Ghost fleets, lost armadas, colonies that disappeared overnight. Tall tales, the kind no sane spacer ever believed. But this was real. Against every bit of common sense I had, I steered my ship closer. The fleet wasn't arranged haphazardly like debris caught in a current. There was purpose to it, an order that made it feel alive, as though the ships were waiting for something. I shivered. My sensors picked up faint energy readings as I approached, but they were weak, barely there. It was as if the fleet had died, but not completely. Like the embers of a fire waiting for someone to stoke them back to life. I toggled the comms and tried hailing the nearest ship. My voice felt small in the quiet. "This is Independent Vessel Wayfinder requesting identification. If anyone's out there, respond." Static. I tried again. "Hello? Is anyone alive out here?" The silence pressed back at me. I knew no one was going to answer, but hearing my voice made the place feel a little less haunted. I took a breath and made my decision. Whatever this fleet was, whoever had left it here, it was too big to ignore. I needed to know more. I docked with the nearest ship, an enormous vessel whose sheer size made my freighter look like a toy. Its hull was dark and cold, unmarked except for strange carvings along its surface that looked almost like symbols or writing. I ran my gloved hand over the markings as I stepped out of the airlock, my boots echoing with each step. The inside of the ship was a graveyard. Empty corridors stretched on endlessly, their walls lined with dead control panels and long-forgotten machinery. Everything was silent, save for the soft hum of my oxygen supply. I moved carefully, shining my light into every shadowed corner as I pressed forward. The scale of the ship was unsettling. The ceilings stretched high above me, their structures alien and unfamiliar. Whoever had built this place didn't think like humans. Every hallway I passed felt like it had been made for something bigger, something not like me. My unease grew with every step, but so did my curiosity. This place wasn't just abandoned, it was preserved, like a monument to something I couldn't yet understand. Then I found it. A room larger than any I'd seen, filled with rows of towering machinery and strange consoles. At the center, something glowed faintly, blue light pulsing like a heartbeat. I felt my chest tighten as I approached, unable to look away. The glow came from a central structure, smooth and glass-like, rising from the floor as though it had grown from the ship itself. Inside, shapes swirled slowly, too indistinct to make sense of, but alive in some way I couldn't explain. My suit's sensors pinged erratically as I stepped closer. The energy was rising, steady and deliberate. I knew I should have turned back. I knew this was the part in the story where the explorer pushes too far and everything goes wrong. But I couldn't stop myself. This wasn't just salvage or scrap. This was something bigger. Something ancient. Maybe something dangerous. I placed my hand on the surface of the structure, half expecting it to burn through my gloves. It was cool to the touch, almost soothing. And then the ship woke up. Lights flickered on across the room, bathing the machinery in a soft, ghostly glow. A low hum vibrated through the floor beneath my boots, growing louder with each passing second. My sensors spiked as the energy readings surged. I stumbled back, heart pounding, as the consoles I'd thought were dead began to light up, flashing strange symbols across their screens. The sound of something shifting echoed through the room, distant but unmistakable. I wasn't alone anymore. Something was here, and it knew I was too. Before I could move, a voice crackled through my comms. It wasn't human. The words were distorted, layered with static, but I could still understand them. Awakening protocol. Activated. My blood ran cold. I staggered toward the door, my lights swinging wildly as I searched for a way out. The ship groaned like a living thing, metal creaking as power surged through its systems. The fleet outside must have been waking up too. I could feel it, the energy spreading, like an ancient machine stretching after a long sleep. I reached the airlock and scrambled back into my ship, slamming my palm against the controls to undock. Come on, I muttered desperately. Outside my viewport, the fleet was coming alive, one ship at a time. Lights burst to life along their hulls, engines flaring faintly as though they were testing themselves for the first time in centuries. I watched, awestruck and terrified, as the fleet stirred around me. This wasn't just a graveyard. It was something much bigger, something that had been waiting for someone like me to stumble into it. The voice in my comms returned, clearer this time, with a tone that almost sounded like understanding. The time has come. You will be our messenger. My stomach dropped as I realized the ships weren't just waking up, they were preparing for something. And whether I wanted to or not, I had just become a part of it. The hum of the fleet's awakening filled the void like a low, unending tremor. My ship's systems were struggling to keep up with the sudden surge of energy around me, alarms flashing angrily across my console. I pushed the throttle to full, trying to put as much distance between myself and the colossal ships as possible. The view outside my window was surreal, thousands of dormant giants shaking off their slumber, their lights flickering on one by one like stars being born. The sheer scale of it made my chest tighten. Whoever or whatever had built this fleet had intended for it to be unstoppable. I managed to pull my ship far enough away to get a clearer view of the entire formation. It was breathtaking. The ships were arranged in a way that defied randomness. Patterns, spirals, lines of perfect symmetry that stretched across the darkness like the work of a meticulous artist. It wasn't the kind of thing you saw in any known human fleet. Human fleets were practical, built for war, trade, or exploration. These ships were something else, ancient, elegant, and unnervingly precise. I kept my eyes fixed on the display as I searched for anything that might give me a clue about what I'd stumbled into. My mind raced with questions. I toggled through my ship's database, searching for any mention of lost fleets, ancient armadas, or unknown civilizations. Nothing matched. These ships weren't in any official records, or at least none that I had access to. It felt impossible for something so massive to exist without anyone knowing about it. Who were they? Why were they here? I glanced back at the energy readings, which were climbing higher and higher. Whatever systems were coming online weren't stopping. It was as if the fleet had been waiting all this time, dormant but ready for the right signal. And somehow, I'd triggered it. I tried to calm myself, forcing my mind to focus on what I knew. There were stories about abandoned ships, ghost fleets that drifted through forgotten corners of space. Pilots who claimed to have seen massive vessels that weren't human, only to disappear without a trace. Most spacers dismissed the stories as myths, but now I wasn't so sure. My pulse quickened as another thought wormed its way into my brain. What if this fleet wasn't abandoned? I'd seen no bodies, no debris, no signs of battle or decay. The ships looked untouched, waiting. The energy surge I'd activated could have been the key to something far worse than a fleet of empty ships. The voice that had spoken to me earlier echoed in my mind. "You will be our messenger." I couldn't shake it. I replayed the words over and over, looking for meaning where there wasn't any. It didn't sound like a threat, but it wasn't a request either. My hands hovered over the comm controls as I considered reaching out again. Maybe there was a chance to communicate, to figure out what was happening. My instincts screamed at me to turn back, to jump out of this sector and never return, but a stronger pull kept me rooted. I couldn't just leave. Not yet. If this fleet was as significant as it appeared, then humanity had to know about it. Or at the very least, I had to understand it myself. I hesitated for a moment before keying in a general broadcast on all frequencies. "This is Independent Vessel Wayfinder. If anyone can hear this, please respond." Static hissed in my ears, broken only by the distant hum of the fleet's energy spikes. I tried again. "If anyone's out there, I need to know what's happening. Who are you? Why are you here?" I sat in silence, staring at the speakers as if willing them to speak. Then the voice returned. Awaiting the return. The words were calm, precise, spoken with an unnatural clarity that sent chills down my spine. I swallowed hard and leaned forward. The return of what? Who's speaking? The voice paused, as though searching for an answer. The architects. The reckoning. The renewal. My heart thudded in my chest as the words echoed through my comms. Architects. Reckoning? What did it all mean? I clenched my fists, frustrated by the cryptic response. I don't understand. Who are the architects? What are you waiting for? The voice didn't answer this time. Only the sound of faint static remained. It was like talking to a ghost or something pretending to be one. The fleet outside my window had fully awakened now. Engines glowed faintly across the massive ships, their energy output stabilizing as though they were preparing for something. A massive formation began to take shape, the ships aligning with impossible precision. I felt small watching it, an insignificant speck caught between the gears of a machine far older and far greater than I could comprehend. That unsettling thought lodged itself in my mind. If the fleet had been waiting, then who were they waiting for? And what happened if they didn't get it? I checked my fuel reserves and the status of my ship's jump drive.
I couldn't stay out here forever. Whatever was happening was beyond me.
I needed to get back to known space, find someone who could make sense of this. But as I punched in the jump coordinates, my console flickered and the systems froze. No, 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 come on, I muttered, slapping the controls. The fleet's energy field was interfering with my systems, holding me there like a spider's web. My ship wasn't going anywhere until they let me. Frustrated, I switched focus to scanning the ships again. There had to be something, a clue, a signature, anything I could use to figure out what these things were and how to get free. My eyes landed on the energy pattern pulsing from the fleet. It wasn't random. It wasn't chaotic. It was rhythmic, almost musical, like a signal being broadcast. I stared at the pattern as the realization struck me. The fleet wasn't just waking up, it was calling something. The implications hit me like a fist. If the fleet was broadcasting a signal, someone or something might respond. And if they did, I had no idea what would come next. My breathing quickened as panic began to rise. "You've got to let me go," I said to the voice, unsure if it could even hear me. "I can't help you. I don't even know what you're waiting for." The comms crackled, and the voice returned, soft but firm. "You are part of it now. The cycle begins." The cycle. The words made my skin crawl. I didn't want to be part of anything. Not this. Not here. A low vibration ran through my ship as the fleet's energy pulse grew stronger. The stars outside the viewport began to shift, blurring at the edges as though the space around us was changing. I gripped the controls tightly, bracing myself. "What are you doing?" I shouted, but the voice didn't answer. The pulse grew louder, a deep and resonant sound that reverberated through my ship, through my bones, like the sound of something colossal moving in the dark. Whatever signal the fleet was broadcasting had reached its peak. And somewhere, something was listening. I didn't know what was about to happen, but I knew one thing for certain: I was no longer alone in the void. The abandoned fleet had woken up, and whatever had built it, whoever it was waiting for, was on its way. The sound, the impossible, vibrating pulse continued to build, sending tremors through my ship like waves crashing against a shore. I struggled to stabilize the systems, but every attempt ended in failure. My control panels flickered like dying stars, and outside, the fleet began to shift. The ships, which had been eerily still moments before, were moving. I could see them reorienting, breaking their perfect formation and aligning towards something beyond my line of sight. I gripped the console, my breath shallow as I whispered. The voice, calm and unrelenting, echoed once more. "The call has been answered." A warning siren blared through my ship, jolting me upright. My sensors picked up something massive moving on the edge of my display, far out beyond the fleet. It was faint at first, just a shadow slipping through the void, but it grew clearer by the second. I stared at the screen, and my pulse hammered in my ears. Something was coming. A presence, larger than any of the ships in the fleet, an object that defied reason or scale. I couldn't even fully comprehend its size. It swallowed the stars, a dark silhouette against the emptiness of space. Shit systems are failing. The onboard AI droned, as if the situation wasn't terrifying enough. I slammed my hand on the console. Not now. Come on. My fingers flew over the controls, trying to bypass whatever interference the fleet was generating, but nothing worked. It was like the ships themselves were holding me in place, forcing me to bear witness to whatever was about to happen. The pulsing sound grew louder, vibrating through the walls of my ship, through my chest, until it felt like my heart was beating in sync with it. Outside, the fleet began to glow, a soft blue light radiating from every vessel. They looked alive now, like ancient titans preparing for battle. My throat was dry, and I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen. The massive object, no, entity was closer now. Its edges were clearer, and its form was unlike anything I'd ever seen. It wasn't a shit, at least not in the way we understood them. It was more organic, flowing and shifting, its surface rippling with energy that pulsed in time with the fleet. I felt a deep unease settle over me. This wasn't just technology. It was something older, something that felt aware. "Is this what you've been waiting for?" I muttered, though I didn't expect an answer. The voice didn't speak this time, but I felt its presence all the same, heavy and unyielding, like it was watching me. I gripped the edge of my seat as the energy from the fleet surged one final time, sending out a beam of light that streaked across space and connected with the approaching entity. The moment it happened, everything went still. The pulse, the vibrations, even the alarms in my ship, all of it stopped. My ship floated in silence, and for a second I thought time itself had frozen. Then the light spread. It started slow, like a ripple across a pond, but it grew faster, brighter, radiating outward until it swallowed everything in view. I shielded my eyes against the blinding glow. When I dared to look again, the fleet was changing. The ship's hulls, once pristine and dormant, were shifting. The metal rippled like liquid, their shapes reforming before my eyes. Symbols I didn't recognize appeared across their surfaces, glowing with an unnatural energy. I gasped as the realization struck me this wasn't just a fleet of ships. It was something more. A weapon? A beacon? I couldn't be sure, but the transformation was undeniable. The entity, now fully connected to the fleet, responded in kind. Its surface lit up, and waves of energy rippled outward, spreading through the void like a silent explosion. I felt it in my bones, a hum of power so vast it was almost incomprehensible. My ship rocked violently, and my sensors went haywire, blaring warnings I couldn't even decipher anymore. I didn't need readings to know what was happening. Something monumental, something far beyond human understanding, had been set into motion, and I was stuck right in the middle of it. A sharp, electronic crackle burst through my comms, and I flinched at the sound. My display screen flickered to life, but instead of the voice I'd grown used to, there was silence. Then, words began appearing across the screen, one by one, typed out by something I couldn't see. "It begins now. The cycle cannot be stopped." I stared at the words, my mind spinning. "What cycle? What are you talking about?" I yelled, my voice breaking with panic. The words disappeared, and for a long moment, nothing happened. The fleet and the entity hung in perfect stillness, as if they were waiting for something. Then the stars shifted. For what felt like an eternity, there was nothing. No sound, no light, just an endless void that seemed to stretch forever. I felt weightless, disconnected from everything, as if my body had become part of the emptiness itself. Then, without warning, the darkness shattered. Light exploded across my vision, brilliant and chaotic, and I found myself plummeting through space. My ship screamed in protest, but I was too disoriented to react. Stars streaked past like meteors, and the rift, now far behind me, closed silently, sealing me in this unknown corner of the galaxy. I fought to steady myself, forcing my hands back onto the controls. "Where am I?" I muttered, blinking against the glare of my display screens. My systems were glitching, the sensors confused and overwhelmed. Slowly, the data began to align, and my heart sank at what I saw. I wasn't alone. Dozens of ships, larger than anything I'd ever encountered, hovered in the distance. Their shapes were alien, twisted and elegant, glowing with the same energy that had pulsed through the fleet I'd seen before. They were silent, but unmistakably alive, as though waiting for something or someone. My stomach churned with dread as I realized I had stumbled into something far bigger than a lost fleet. This was a gathering, a convergence. The voice returned, louder this time, reverberating through the ship. "You were chosen to witness the awakening." My breath caught in my throat. The entity, or whatever controlled this place, knew I was here. I felt it watching me, studying me as though I were an insect caught in its web. The massive, alien ships shifted slightly, their glowing surfaces pulsing in unison, and I realized they were aligning themselves toward a central point. My eyes followed their trajectory, and my blood ran cold. In the center of the formation was something even more immense than the ships themselves. It wasn't a vessel. It was a construct, ancient and impossible. It resembled a massive sphere, miles across, its surface smooth and black like obsidian, but covered in glowing lines that moved as though alive. At first glance, it appeared dormant, but then I saw a flicker of light deep within its core. A heartbeat. This was no mere object. It was something alive, something ancient beyond reckoning, and it was waking up. My ship lurched as a wave of energy rolled outward from the sphere, rippling through space and rattling every system. I gripped the console, watching in horror as the alien ships responded. They began to glow brighter, each one sending out beams of energy that connected to the central sphere. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through my chest like the pulse I'd felt earlier. The realization hit me hard. This wasn't just a fleet, it was a network. These ships were part of a singular force, an ancient machine, and I had been dragged straight into the center of its awakening. "Fleet Command, can you hear me?" I shouted desperately into the comms, but all I got was static. I was completely alone out here, stranded with an army I couldn't understand and a structure that defied all logic. I searched the controls for a way to disengage, to escape, but the gravitational field of the sphere held me firmly in place. My sensors began to pick up more data, and I froze when I saw the readings. The sphere wasn't just activating, it was broadcasting. Energy was radiating outward, stronger than anything I'd seen, rippling through the stars. And then I saw them, ships. Human ships. They were small and distant, but unmistakably ours, heading toward the same location. My blood ran cold. Someone else had answered the call. "No, no, no," I whispered. This wasn't a coincidence. The sphere's activation was a signal, one that humans had picked up, just like I had. But they didn't know what they were walking into. They were headed straight for something none of us could possibly comprehend. The whisper came again, so loud it felt like it was inside my head. "You must choose. Witness or resist." The voice echoed through my mind, relentless and cold. I looked back at the sphere, at the alien ships, and at the human fleet approaching from the distance. My chest tightened as the pieces fell into place. This wasn't just a call, it was a test. Humanity had been brought here for a reason, and now, so had I. I was caught between two forces, one ancient and unknowable, and one all too human. And the sphere, with its impossible power, was the key to everything. The alien ships began to shift again, their energy surging as the sphere grew brighter, its core pulsing like the beating of a massive heart. I could feel the pressure building, the hum growing louder, as though the entire universe was holding its breath. My ship trembled as I realized that whatever was about to happen would change everything: humanity, the stars, and whatever lay beyond. My fingers hovered over the controls, and I felt the weight of the decision pressing down on me. Witness. But before I could move, a blinding flash erupted from the sphere, and the universe cracked open. The light from the sphere was overwhelming, a torrent of energy that seemed to burn through the fabric of space itself. I shielded my eyes, my heart racing as the pulse reached its crescendo. The alien ships surged with power, their glowing tendrils now fused into the sphere's surface, feeding it like veins pumping lifeblood into a sleeping giant. My sensors were in chaos, screens flickering, alarms blaring, yet I couldn't tear my eyes away. Something irreversible had begun. The void surrounding me seemed alive with tension, the weight of 1,000 possibilities pressing in all at once. Suddenly, the hum stopped. The blinding light dimmed, and a chilling silence filled the air. I stared at the sphere, expecting some final eruption, but it remained still, deadly and waiting. The alien ships hovered quietly now, their energy fading to a dull glow. For one brief moment, I thought it was over. My mind struggled to process what had just happened. The structure had awoken, but to what end? Then my sensors picked up something new, and dread twisted in my gut. The human fleet had arrived. They appeared at the edge of the system, dozens of ships emerging from faster-than-light travel, their sleek silhouettes unmistakable against the star-streaked backdrop. They were close enough for me to hear the faint chatter of their comms as they scanned the area, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. My breath hitched. They didn't know what they were walking into. The sphere was awake now, connected to its alien guardians, and the arrival of humans had tipped the balance. This was no longer just a discovery, it was a confrontation. Before I could send a warning, the alien ships moved. The stillness shattered in an instant as the fleet's energy reignited, bright as flares against the dark. Their formation was deliberate, efficient, moving like a single organism. The sphere pulsed once, a low vibration that resonated across my ship, and the human fleet reacted in confusion. I watched in horror as the alien ships began to advance, their beams of energy charging for a strike. I slammed my fists onto the comms, desperation choking me. Fleet Command, this is Recon 12. You're walking into an ambush. Stand down. Repeat, stand down. Static hissed back at me, but I could see the human fleet readying weapons, their sensors picking up the hostile movements. A terrible thought clawed its way to the surface. This is what the sphere wanted. It had called us here, but not to communicate. It had summoned humanity and its defenders into a test, a violent reckoning, and I was the only one who understood it. I had to act. My ship shook as I pushed the engines to their limit, cutting through the vast distance between me and the fleets. The controls groaned in protest, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to watch this become the start of a war. The alien ships fired first, beams of light cutting through the void, targeting the human ships closest to the sphere. Explosions rippled across space, the bright flashes consuming entire vessels in seconds. The human fleet responded, their weapons lighting up the dark, but they were outmatched. The alien ships moved with an eerie precision, coordinated like they shared a single mind. "Stop!" I screamed into the void, as if sheer willpower would bring everything to a halt. My fingers flew over the controls, forcing my ship into the heart of the conflict. The alien ships paid me no attention, focused on their targets, but the sphere it saw me. The pulse returned, vibrating through my skull, and the whisper followed, louder now, a chorus of voices speaking as one. "Choose." I fought against the pull of the voice, gritting my teeth as I pushed the ship toward the sphere. The energy rolling off it was immense, crackling against my shields as if trying to force me away. I knew what I had to do, though the thought of it sent terror through me. I had to sever the connection. The sphere's activation had sparked this violence, and as long as it remained powered by the alien fleet, the fighting wouldn't stop. I rerouted every bit of power I had into my engines, locking onto the point where the energy beams fed into the sphere's surface. "Come on, hold together," I muttered, sweat streaming down my face. My ship rattled violently as the gravitational field pulled at me like invisible chains, trying to tear the vessel apart. Ahead of me, the alien ships seemed to notice for the first time. Some broke formation, streaking toward me like knives through the dark. I braced myself, weaving through the chaos, narrowly dodging their fire. My hull groaned, systems sparking, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. With a final, desperate surge, I broke through. My ship slammed into the energy stream, and a blinding shockwave erupted. Alarms shrieked as my ship spun out of control, shields failing instantly. I clung to the console, feeling the heat rise as fire licked through the cabin. But through the chaos, I saw something had changed. The sphere faltered. The glow along its surface dimmed, and the alien ships froze mid-movement, as if their link had been severed. The pulse in my head vanished, replaced by a deafening silence. I barely registered the human fleet moving in to capitalize on the moment. Their ships surged forward, weapons cutting through the disoriented alien vessels. The sphere itself remained still now, dark and lifeless, its energy extinguished. It felt as though the entire system held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. My ship, battered and broken, drifted helplessly through the aftermath. I slumped back in my seat, too exhausted to move. Then, just as I thought it was over, a final shockwave burst outward from the sphere, rippling across space. It wasn't destructive. This was something different. My sensors lit up with new data as the energy passed through me, spreading like a ripple across the galaxy. In its wake, I saw something astonishing. Stars, distant and forgotten, flickered to life. Beacons, hidden across the void, now shone bright and clear. The realization struck me like a hammer. The sphere had never been a weapon. It had been a signal. The war, the conflict, all of it had been part of something much bigger. The energy had awoken beacons scattered across the galaxy, as though they were lighting a path. I didn't know where that path led, but one thing was certain: humanity's place in the universe had changed forever. The aliens had tested us, not out of malice, but to see if we could endure. And now, with the beacons lit, the real journey was only beginning. I exhaled shakily as the human fleet regrouped, their ships drifting cautiously in the wake of what we'd survived. My comms crackled to life again, voices breaking through the static, calling for answers. I stared out at the stars, my mind spinning with questions of my own. Somewhere out there, something was waiting, something ancient, something powerful, and I had a feeling this was only the first step. The whispers didn't return, but the silence left in their absence felt heavier somehow, as if the universe itself was watching. I looked toward the distant beacons glowing faintly in the dark and set my course toward the unknown. Whatever was waiting for us, humanity would face it together. After all, we had been chosen. The stillness after the chaos was almost as deafening as the battle itself. The alien ships, once fearsome and unrelenting, now floated aimlessly. The sphere no longer radiated its mysterious energy, and the beacon-like signals had spread far beyond the system. In the eerie calm, the human fleet regrouped, their movements cautious but deliberate, as if afraid that the fragile silence might shatter at any moment. My ship drifted along the outskirts of the formation, battered and barely operational. Sparks danced from exposed wiring, and my oxygen reserves were running dangerously low. The comms crackled sporadically, but I could make out fragments of hurried voices, fleet commanders coordinating damage control, medical ships deployed to rescue survivors, and urgent calls for information about what had just transpired. Yet, even amid the logistical scramble, there was an unspoken weight hanging over everyone. Something bigger had just begun, and no one could ignore it. The beacons, though distant, now pulsed faintly across the galaxy like stars reborn. They seemed to form a path, a deliberate route leading somewhere unknown. My mind raced with possibilities. What were they guiding us to? Who had placed them there? And why now, after eons of silence? My thoughts circled back to the voice, the chorus that had whispered choose, and I wondered whether my decision to sever the sphere's connection had truly been the right one. Had I stopped a war or triggered something far more dangerous? The human fleet's flagship, Vanguard, sent out a transmission to all surviving ships. The commanding officer's voice was calm but firm, masking the underlying tension. To all vessels, this is Admiral Rail. Stand down from combat readiness. The alien fleet is disabled. I repeat, the alien fleet is disabled. Emergency teams are prioritizing recovery operations. Recon vessels, prepare to report findings immediately. I hesitated, unsure whether my battered ship could even manage a stable signal. But I knew I had to try. Leaning forward, I activated the comms and patched into the main channel. Recon 12 reporting, I said, my voice hoarse from the strain. I've got critical information about the sphere and the beacons. The channel went quiet for a moment before the Admiral responded. Recon 12, we've been tracking your position. Your actions appear to have disrupted the sphere's core. Stand by for extraction. Admiral, it's not just the sphere, I insisted, ignoring the exhaustion in my limbs. The beacons, it's a signal, a path. This wasn't just a weapon. It's something more. We need to understand what it's pointing us toward. There was another pause, this one longer, as if the weight of my words took time to sink in. Understood, the Admiral said finally. But we can't afford to act recklessly. Recon 12, you'll be debriefed once you're aboard the Vanguard. We need to analyze this carefully. Relief flooded through me as I saw a rescue craft break formation and head in my direction. My ship's systems flickered one last time before going completely dark, leaving me adrift in the vast silence of space. As the rescue craft latched onto my hull, I closed my eyes, letting the tension in my body unravel. For now, I was safe. Once aboard the Vanguard, I was rushed to the medbay for evaluation, though I could see the bustling corridors filled with crew members exchanging hurried reports. The atmosphere was tense, but alive with purpose, a stark contrast to the emptiness I'd felt drifting alone. After a brief medical check, I was ushered into the strategy room, where the Admiral and senior officers waited. The holographic display in the center showed the sphere, now dormant, and the faint beacons scattered across the galaxy. The Admiral turned to me as I entered, her expression unreadable. "You've had the closest contact with this phenomenon. We need answers." I recounted everything: the pulse, the voice, the sensation that the sphere was testing us. I described how the energy had awakened the beacons, and the sense that they were guiding us towards something deliberate. The officers listened intently, their faces a mixture of awe and unease. When I finished, the room fell silent, save for the faint hum of the ship's systems. "It's a message," one of the science officers finally said, breaking the silence. "The beacons are ancient. Their design predates anything we've encountered before, even the alien fleet. They were dormant until the sphere activated them. Whatever this is, it's not just a relic, it's an invitation." "An invitation to what?" another officer asked, his voice tinged with skepticism. "A trap. Another war? Or a chance?" I interjected. The sphere wasn't just testing our strength, it was testing our resolve, our choices. "I don't think the beacons are leading us to an enemy. They're leading us to a truth, something we're meant to find." The Admiral studied the hologram, her expression thoughtful. "Whatever it is, it's clear that humanity can't ignore this. If we don't follow the path, someone else will. The question is whether we're ready for what we might find." The decision was made to send an expeditionary force to investigate the first beacon, which was located on the edge of a nearby star cluster. I volunteered without hesitation, knowing I couldn't walk away from what I'd started. The fleet began preparations, refueling and repairing ships while gathering data from the sphere's remnants. As I watched the activity from the observation deck, a deep sense of purpose settled over me. This was bigger than any one person, any one species. The galaxy was opening itself to us, and we had to be ready to step through. The journey to the first beacon was fraught with tension. Every crew member knew we were venturing into the unknown, and the weight of that uncertainty hung heavy in the air. As we approached the beacon's coordinates, the tension reached a breaking point. The structure came into view, an enormous, crystalline formation floating in the void, its surface glowing faintly with the same energy as the sphere. It was beautiful and alien, a monument to a forgotten age. The fleet maintained a safe distance as a small team, including myself, approached the beacon in a reconnaissance vessel. As we neared, the energy surrounding the structure seemed to reach out to us, pulling gently but insistently. Instruments went haywire, and my pulse quickened as the ship's lights flickered. Then, as if sensing our presence, the beacon activated. A cascade of symbols and images filled our screen's maps, star charts, and glimpses of ancient civilizations that had long since vanished. Among the images was something unmistakable: Earth. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. The beacons were tied to our origins, to the very fabric of humanity's existence. Whatever lay at the end of this path wasn't just a discovery, it was a reckoning with our past and a challenge for our future. The message was clear: we were not alone, and we never had been. Over the following weeks, the fleet continued to follow the beacon's trail, uncovering more pieces of the puzzle. Each new discovery revealed fragments of a galaxy once teeming with life, united by a shared purpose, until something shattered it all. The beacons were a last effort to preserve that legacy, waiting for a species capable of understanding their significance. As we neared the final beacon, the stakes became clear. The journey wasn't just about uncovering the past, it was about shaping the future. The galaxy was offering us a choice to rise above our divisions and embrace our place among the stars, or to falter and repeat the mistakes of those who came before us. In the end, it wasn't the technology or the knowledge that mattered most. It was the realization that humanity's strength lay in its resilience, its ability to learn and adapt. The revolution sparked by the abandoned fleet wasn't about conquest or power, it was about hope. And as we stood on the threshold of a new chapter, we knew the real journey was just beginning.